The series begins with a patient named Troy lying on his bed while a video is being recorded of him, stating that he has chosen to end his life peacefully through assisted death. Sitting with him is a doctor named Mary, the one responsible for carrying out his euthanasia. She prepares a specific sedative, mixes it into a glass of champagne, and hands it to him to drink. Troy feels anxious about the step he's about to take and keeps looking at a picture of his wife, whom he loves deeply. Mary realizes he isn't ready to leave yet, so she tells him that if he wants to change his mind, she'll support him and that he doesn't have to do anything against his will. But Troy insists on ending his life since his illness has no cure. He drinks the champagne, closes his eyes, and peacefully slips away, just as he wished. Mary's colleague, Dr. Bennett, confirms that Troy has passed. Before they can leave, they hear his wife coming back home, calling out to him as she enters. Panicked, they try to get out quickly before she sees them inside. They rush to the balcony to escape, but Mary suddenly remembers she left the payment on the nightstand. She goes back alone and is shocked to find Troy still alive, struggling in pain. Horrified, she decides to end his suffering with her own hands by placing a pillow over his face until he stops breathing. She then runs back to the balcony, joins Bennett, and the two of them jump off and escape. Once they're away, Mary argues with Bennett, blaming him because he was the one who confirmed Troy was gone when he clearly wasn't. Something had gone wrong, since it was the first time a patient didn't fully pass after the sedative. It couldn't have been the champagne. She reminds Bennett to double-check his work, because as doctors, their job is to ease the patient's pain, not prolong it. Later, Mary returns home and finds her daughters, Jess and Camby. They ask her what happens to the patients once their lives are over. She tells them they live on as memories. Just then, their father, Kevin, Mary's ex-husband, arrives to pick them up as agreed. He reminds Mary to focus more on her daughters instead of putting all her time into her work, because her absence is affecting them. With that, he takes the girls and leaves. She then goes to the storage room in the house, where she keeps a spare key hidden above the door to stash the sedatives under the floorboards. But she notices that all the seals on the sedatives have been tampered with and opened before. She immediately calls Bennett to tell him, since he's the one who buys the drugs from a specific supplier, and warns him to find a new one because this one has been diluting the sedatives. That was the reason their previous patient didn't pass away peacefully. She hangs up on him and then heads to her hospital shift, treating patients and the injured. She successfully saves a man who was stabbed while withdrawing money from an ATM. Later, she sneaks away to smoke a cigarette out of sight, where she meets Annie, her colleague at the hospital. Annie secretly provides her with files of patients requesting assisted death, something completely hidden from the hospital administration because it's illegal and could land her in prison or even on death row, even if the patient consents. Annie gives her 2 new case files and tells Mary she's already given the patients her number, adding that behind every great doctor is a great nurse, before leaving. One of the files belongs to a patient named Joel, who has cancer. Standing in front of the mirror, he repeats to himself that his life is about to end soon. He calls Mary's number, telling her he got it from Annie and that he's ready to go. Meanwhile, Bennett goes to confront his supplier about tampering with the sedatives. The supplier admits he diluted them with water, wanting to make sure Bennett wasn't selling them to someone else, because that could have caused big trouble if the drug didn't work properly. Now that he trusts Bennett, he gives him a new batch of sedatives for free and tells him to take care of himself, warning him not to use too much at once since he's worried about his health. The supplier has no idea what the sedatives are really used for, only knowing Bennett as a doctor. Bennett leaves with the drugs. Back at Mary's house, Jess and her friend Naomi are home alone. They decide to sneak into the storage room to smoke cigarettes freely without Mary catching Jess. Sitting on the floor, they notice the boards don't feel solid, almost hollow underneath. They lift the wooden planks and discover the stash of diluted sedatives along with a ringing phone. Jess is puzzled as to why her mother would be hiding sedatives under the storage room floor, but she carefully puts everything back in place so Mary won't notice. Meanwhile, Mary goes with Bennett to the apartment of Joel, the cancer patient who has requested assisted death. Bennett talks to him, explaining that in Switzerland, euthanasia is legal, and he could travel there to have it done, though it would cost $20,000, or he could pay them $10,000, and they would handle it for him. Joel agrees right away, but Mary tells him he shouldn't make such a quick decision and needs to take more time to think about what's truly right for him. Joel insists that it's either their method or he'll buy a gun and end his life himself to escape the pain. He says he'll decide decide soon and call them back. After leaving Joel, Mary attends her daughter's ballet recital. While watching, she realizes her ex-husband is now in a relationship with Lisa, the mother of Naomi, Jess's friend. Mary feels upset when she sees this, but they continue watching the performance until, halfway through, Naomi collapses on stage. Mary rushes to her and immediately gets her transferred to the hospital, where she works so she can oversee her condition personally. When Mary asks if she's been using drugs, Naomi admits she took some of the sedatives she found under the storage room floor, but without Jess knowing. She explains she has stage fright and had taken some before going on stage, and she begs Mary not to tell her mother, fearing Lisa, who's a lawyer, would punish her or lock her at home if she found out. Mary realizes that telling Lisa about the sedatives would cause trouble for herself, so she decides to cover it up, telling Lisa that Naomi simply has anemia from poor eating habits, and that's what caused her to faint. Lisa takes Naomi home, and soon after, Mary gets a call from Joel. He tells her he's ready to go through with her method and wants to proceed with assisted death. Mary agrees to meet him and heads to his apartment. On the way, she notices someone from Joel's building watching her, but doesn't pay it much attention. When she arrives, she apologizes for showing up without warning. Joel asks her why she practices euthanasia, and she explains that every person should have the right to make decisions about their own life and death. It shouldn't be dictated by government laws. She adds that if Switzerland allows it, then the only thing stopping them is the state's perspective, not morality. They keep talking until they begin to get closer, but suddenly Joel pushes Mary away, saying it's because he's sick. Mary feels insulted and leaves his apartment, but Joel runs after her to apologize, explaining that he's only ready for death and didn't mean to offend her. She walks away, and Joel heads to a black car parked outside where he meets Frank, the same man who had been watching Mary in the hallway. It's revealed that Joel and Frank are undercover police officers assigned to arrest Mary after her admission that she performs assisted deaths. Frank has already recorded her agreement to help Joel, but the problem is that the recording also includes their intimate interaction, which could jeopardize Joel's job. Forced to protect himself, Joel takes the hard drive with the recording and destroys it, making it as if it never existed. Frank reluctantly agrees, since Joel is his friend and had once helped him in a similar situation. Meanwhile, Mary returns home and notices the light on in the storage room. When she goes inside, she finds her daughter Jess lifting the floorboards, searching for the sedatives. Mary steps in and explains that she kept the drugs hidden to use them one day for her mother, who has cancer, to spare her suffering when the time comes. Jess believes her, and the moment passes. Elsewhere, Troy's widow mourns her husband's death, holding his jacket while crying. She finds a note with Mary's phone number on it. The next day, an elderly woman is at the swimming pool training with her friends, full of joy. After finishing, she says goodbye to them, throws her swimsuit into the trash, knowing she won't need it again, and walks to the beach. Mary and Bennett are already waiting for her. She apologizes for being late and says she chose such an open place for her death because it mattered to her. It made her happy that she could finally choose her own ending, not have it dictated by hospitals and treatments. She adds that this was her and her late husband's favorite spot. Mary promises she won't feel any pain, prepares the champagne mixed with the sedative, and hands it to her. After finishing the glass, the woman lies down on a rock and passes away peacefully. This time, Mary makes sure to personally check that the woman's pulse has stopped, confirming she truly died, because what happened with their last patient was more than enough. They know that within an hour, more people will arrive at the beach and notice the elderly woman, so they leave quickly. Afterward, Mary goes to meet Joel under the pretense of helping him with treatment options. She brings a full file of possible cancer therapies and sits with him at a cafe, unaware that Frank is monitoring and listening to every word. She hands Joel the file and explains that a colleague of hers is conducting experimental treatments for cancer, and he might still have a chance at recovery instead of choosing death. Joel pretends to be upset, frowns, and abruptly leaves the cafe. Mary runs after him, urging him to try the treatments she's offering and telling him there's still hope. But Joel insists he's exhausted from hospitals, treatments, and endless radiation sessions. He'll go through with his decision, with or without her. He gets into his car and drives away. Meanwhile, Annie is at the hospital dealing with a patient and her son. The son asks her how much morphine it would take to let someone die painlessly. Annie realizes the mother wants to end her suffering. She tells him she can't give him that information, but she knows someone who might help, and she gives him Mary's number. Later, meets Mary to discuss the case of his mother, Yvonne, who is requesting assisted death with his support. Mary agrees to visit them that night. Then she receives a call from Frank, posing as Joel's doctor, telling her Joel's condition is beyond beyond treatment and that he supports Joel's choice for assisted death, arguing that it would be more merciful than letting him continue in agony. Convinced, Mary decides she'll go to Joel first to end his life, then head to Yvonne. She picks up her daughters to drop them off at Lisa and Kevin's house. Once back in her car, she calls Bennett and tells him to meet her later at Yvonne's house. She'll handle Joel first and then join him. After hanging up, she gets a call from Joel, who tells her he has decided to end his life on his own and has bought a gun. Panicked, she rushes to his apartment to stop him, insisting that she'll take care of it. When she arrives, Joel is holding the gun, pretending to be ready to shoot himself. She tells him his doctor called her, and she has agreed to help him die. Joel hands her payment for the job, but she refuses to take his money, telling him she doesn't want anything from him except for him to find peace. Joel replies that he'll finally feel peace once he knows exactly how she's going to end his life, and by what method in detail. She grows suspicious because no one preparing to die would care so much about the exact method. She tells him she needs to wash her hands first, then heads to the bathroom to look for his medications. Finding not a single pill bottle, something impossible for a cancer patient, she realizes Joel isn't sick at all, but a cop trying to trap her. Nervous, she leaves the bathroom and tells Joel she has to go downstairs to get his file to make sure the drugs won't interfere with what she's about to do. As soon as she gets outside, she calls Bennett and tells him Joel is a police officer and to postpone the meeting with Yvonne. She rushes to her car to escape, only to find another car blocking her in. Panicked, she dumps all the sedatives into the sewer, so there's no evidence left. Joel runs after her, demanding to know what's going on, but she tells him she can't go through with their deal and drives off immediately. Meanwhile, Bennett is at Yvonne's house checking on her condition. She's so weak, she can't even move, and her son Charlie is devastated to see her suffering. He hands Bennett an envelope full of cash to end his mother's life. Bennett apologizes, saying they have to delay due to unexpected circumstances, but Charlie refuses to accept that. Desperate to ease his mother's pain, he pulls out a gun and threatens Bennett, demanding he follow through. Bennett is forced to call Mary, telling her to come to Yvonne's house because Charlie is holding him at gunpoint. Mary admits she has no sedatives left since she dumped them in the sewer. Bennett tries to calm Charlie down, but Charlie fires, hitting him in the shoulder and knocking him to the ground. Mary fears he's dead, but Bennett manages to get up and tells her the bullet only grazed his shoulder. He insists they still have to help Charlie because they're his only option. He then sends Mary the supplier's name and address so she can buy a new batch of sedatives. Mary rushes to the supplier immediately, but he's wary and doesn't trust her since he had just given Bennett a full package. She quickly lies, telling him the box was lost by mistake and that she urgently needs another one. He gives her a box and takes her picture with his camera as a safety measure for himself. Then she leaves. At the same time, Frank and Joel return to their office to meet with a judge named Grant, the one who assigned them to arrest Mary for performing assisted deaths. Grant believes she was connected to his son's death and wants her caught in the act. Joel and Frank explain they're trying to record her process with patience and that they're close to arresting her. Meanwhile, Mary arrives at Yvonne's house, where Charlie lets her in. The first thing she does is take the gun from his hand and put it into her own bag to keep it away from him. She then prepares a sedative injection, since Yvonne is too weak to drink champagne the way they usually administer it. She asks Charlie one final time if he's sure about letting his mother go, then injects Yvonne in the arm. Charlie breaks down crying as he watches his mother slowly slip away, closing her eyes and passing on. Mary and Bennett leave him and go back to Bennett's place to treat his wound. Bennett assumes Mary has decided to quit and won't help anyone else again, but she tells him that just as she almost got caught with Joel, she also relieved Yvonne of her suffering, and she intends to continue, only with more caution. She then asks about her cat, which she had told her daughters she had put down and had asked Bennett to look after. Bennett tells her he left the window open and the cat likely escaped. Relieved, she goes back home. Soon after, her phone rings. It's Troy's widow, asking why Mary's number was written on a note found in her husband's jacket pocket. Mary hangs up without answering. When she arrives, Joel is waiting for her, revealing his real name is Ben. Mary tells him his attempt failed. If he had succeeded, he would have arrested her already. Ben insists that what she's doing is illegal and that she can't play God by deciding people's fates. She brushes him off, claiming she doesn't know what he's talking about, and goes inside, shutting the door behind her. A week passes without Mary taking on any new cases, certain that Ben is still watching her. One morning, she drives to Bennett's house, and together they prepare to meet a new patient requesting assisted death. As they leave, Ben follows Mary's car closely, tailing her all the way until she arrives at a nursing home. Ben is certain she's meeting a new victim. He checks the visitor logs to see who the latest visitor was and rushes to a specific room, but Mary isn't there. When he asks about her, the young woman inside with her mother tells him that Mary is a colleague of her boyfriend Bennett and that she borrowed her car so she could visit her mother in the nursing home. Ben realizes Mary tricked him into tailing her car while she actually went somewhere else. In fact, she has already arrived at the home of her new patient. The woman sits with her husband, waiting for Mary. She welcomes Mary warmly, explaining that she has suffered enough in life and is ready to end it on her own terms with the man she loves beside her. As usual, Mary mixes the sedative into a drink, gives it to her, and accepts payment for the procedure. Later, Mary picks up her daughters to drop them off at school in a rented car. While unloading her school bag, Jess notices an envelope full of cash in her mother's bag and begins to suspect that Mary is hiding something wrong from her. After saying goodbye, Mary spots a car tailing her. She calls Ben, telling him she knows he's watching and demands a meeting. When they meet, she mocks him, saying she feels like someone is following her everywhere, making her uneasy, and she's considering calling the police to report it. Ben replies that she's right, that calling the police would solve everything, since then she'd be assigned an officer to monitor her at home, at the hospital, and everywhere she goes, which would prevent her from carrying out any more assisted deaths. Mary shoots back that he's delusional and warns that she might call her lawyer to report that the officer supposedly monitoring her tried to get close to her. That alone could end his career, so he'd better leave her alone and forget about her. She walks away and heads to the hospital, where she gives Annie the payment from Yvonne's case. But Annie is shaken, knowing what happened with Ben, and confesses she's thinking about backing out completely. She's so scared that she carries her passport everywhere, ready to flee back to China at any moment if things go wrong. Mary reassures her that there's no evidence against them and nothing to be afraid of. Mary takes from Annie the file of the next patient who has requested an assisted death. Meanwhile, Ben is frustrated by his last encounter with Mary, her calm defiance and lack of fear, so he decides to dig into every death case from recent months, hoping to find a family who might identify Mary as being involved. He enlists Frank's help in the search. At the hospital, Mary is surprised when a gunshot victim is rushed into the ER. Police officers refuse to leave his side because he's a suspect in a drug case. The moment Mary sees him, she recognizes him as Sydney, the assistant to the supplier from whom Bennett buys sedatives. Sydney also recognizes her, but before he can speak, she sedates him so he'll sleep and they can treat his injuries. She barely has time to recover from the shock before another emergency patient with heart problems arrives, needing immediate surgery, and she rushes into the operating room with him. Meanwhile, Joel combs through patient records of those who had died, searching for anyone connected to Mary whose family might recognize her. Among the files, he finds Troy, the former soccer player who became ill. Joel is intrigued since Troy's death came suddenly without clear signs of assisted euthanasia, and he decides to investigate further. Back at the hospital, Mary is confronted by the drug supplier himself, Bennett's contact. He demands that she keep Sydney in the hospital longer until he can find a way to smuggle him out, because if Sydney is arrested, he'll lose his right-hand man. In his line of work, trust is everything, and replacing Sydney would be nearly impossible. He threatens to expose her if she refuses to cooperate. Mary snaps back that she won't help him and insists he can't touch her. Shaken, she goes straight to Bennett's house to confront him, furious that his shady supplier has crossed into her workplace and threatened her. She throws him the file of another patient who wants her life ended, saying they'll handle it later when things calm down. Together, they agree to scale back their operations until Bennett can secure a new supplier. Meanwhile, Jess and Naomi are eating at a restaurant. Jess confides that she suspects her mother is involved in drug trafficking because she once found a large envelope of cash in her bag, in addition to the stash of drugs she discovered in the storage room. Naomi replies that even if Mary is a drug dealer, there's nothing they can say or do because turning her in would only send her to prison, and they wouldn't gain anything from it. Jess assumes Naomi has money to pay at the restaurant, but both girls turn out to be broke. They decide to sneak out without paying, but the owner chases after them. Just before he catches them, the dealer, Grady, pretends to know them, calling them his nieces to save them from trouble. He apologizes to the owner for their behavior, pays the bill, and then secretly sends Mary their photo, pressuring her to help him smuggle Sydney out of the hospital and reminding her who's really in control. Mary immediately acts, requesting Sydney be transferred from the ER to a regular room, arguing there's no reason to keep him in emergency care. Once in his room, a guard remains stationed outside, ready to escort him to prison once he's stable. Inside, Bennett meets Sydney, quickly changes his clothes, hides his face, and wheels him out in a chair, sneaking him past security. Mary then takes Sydney from Bennett to hand him over to Grady, demanding that Grady stay away from her family or she'll report him. Just as she's about to walk away, a colleague approaches, forcing her to get into Grady's car. He drives off, refusing to let her leave until she witnesses what he'll do to Sydney. Staring at him, Grady asks Sydney what he was thinking when he decided to steal his product and sell it outside Grady's territory, as if Grady wouldn't find out. Because of Sydney's recklessness, his name has now appeared in police records, making him a target. The tension terrifies Mary, and when Grady finally lets her out, she bolts from the car in panic, so shaken that she doesn't even notice her phone slip out. By the time she realizes, she considers going back, but a gunshot rings out from inside the car. Horrified, she understands that Grady has killed Sydney for betraying him. Shaken to the core, she decides to leave the phone behind and runs off. When she returns to the hospital, she looks visibly distressed and on edge. She sees Joel and Frank investigating cases of assisted deaths, and Joel approaches her. Tearfully, Mary begs him to leave her alone, saying she needs to return to her family immediately. Joel hands her his phone number, telling her to call him anytime. Mary rushes home, desperate to check on her daughters. Mary goes to confront Jess after finding out she skipped school since Grady had taken photos of them outside. She scolds her, saying she should feel safe knowing her daughter is in class and that she can't just sneak out with Naomi whenever she wants. Jess fires back, calling her a hypocrite because what Mary does is dangerous and far from safe. She storms off, leaving Mary frustrated. Mary then announces that all of them will go stay with their father Kevin and his partner Lisa for a while until she can deal with the pressure of work. She drops them off at Lisa's house and then meets with Bennett, telling him that Grady is now threatening her through her daughters, that the police are swarming the hospital investigating her, and that she was forced into helping Sydney escape, breaking the law, and ultimately contributing to his death. She begins blaming Bennett for everything, but he snaps back, saying if she wants to blame someone, she should blame herself. She was the one who approached him with this work after he lost his medical license. She was the one who wanted to end people's lives under the guise of mercy, and she was the one carrying her unresolved issues with her mother into every decision. She chose this path, and everything happening to her is on her. With that, he leaves her. Shaken, Mary decides to call Ben, asking him to meet her at a small motel, intending to finally tell him everything. But when they meet, she backs out, apologizing and saying she can't talk because of work, then walks away. Later, Ben returns to work, where Frank tells him they found a patient who ended his life after struggling with depression for months. Frank believes if they dig deeper, they'll find a connection to Mary, and then they can pressure Bennett, her accomplice, to bring her down. Ben replies that he had been with Mary the night before and sensed she was afraid of something. That's why she called him, for a sense of safety. If she called once, she'll call again, and when she does, he'll push her until she confesses, and they'll finally have what they need. Meanwhile, Mary heads home from the motel to rest, only to find Grady waiting for her. She confronts him, making it clear she meant every word when she told him to stay away from her house and her daughters, because she's willing to do absolutely anything to protect them. Grady tells her that the whole idea of selling the sedative to Bennett was suspicious because very few addicts would ever choose that particular drug. Bennett looked too healthy, not like an addict at all. When he investigated further, he discovered the drug was being used for euthanasia, for ending lives. And he was stunned that a wealthy, respected, and beautiful doctor like Mary would be involved in something like that. But then he told himself it wasn't his place to judge anyone, that all he cared about was business. From now on, though, whenever she or Bennett came to buy from him, they'd need to cut him in on a share of the profits they were making from their secret work. With that, he leaves. Later, Mary decides to go to her sister Nicole's house, fully aware that Ben is tailing her, but ignoring it as she drives on. She parks in front of Nicole's home, and Ben spots her. Before getting out of his car, he calls his partner to give him the address, wanting to know who owns the house. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out, and Ben fears someone has been killed inside. He rushes toward the sound, only to find Nicole teaching her sister how to shoot tin cans for practice. When they notice him, Nicole demands to know who he is and why he's there. Mary introduces him as a police officer who's been watching her, and Nicole realizes her sister is in serious trouble. She leaves them to talk, and during the conversation, Ben decides to teach Mary how to handle a gun properly, just in case she ever needs to defend herself. He even ends up staying for dinner with Mary and her sister. Meanwhile, Bennett is with a new patient, checking on his condition. The patient has been suffering since he was 2 years old, having tried every treatment without success. A lung transplant would risk his life, so doctors refused to attempt it. With no options left, he's decided that ending his life is the only solution. Bennett reassures him that their method won't cause any pain, explaining that Mary usually works with him but stayed behind this time because of issues between them. The patient tells Bennett to hold on to his friends as much as possible because they're the ones who stand by you when you're sick. That's wisdom from someone who knows. He thanks Bennett for the advice and promises they'll see each other very soon, even giving him his guitar as a gift. After leaving, Bennett decides to call Mary to apologize for what happened between them. He tells her he never meant to fight with her, that sometimes friends argue, but they don't break apart. While talking, he notices a police car behind him. At first, he thinks it's just a traffic stop for being on the phone while driving, but it turns out to be Frank. Frank forces him to come down to the station for questioning on a specific matter. At the station, Frank tries to trip him up about the death of Troy, the former soccer player. Bennett stays firm, insisting that he and Mary only comfort patients near the end of life with words, nothing more. Frank then tries to rattle him, asking if he knows Mary spent a day at a motel with Ben, also known as Joel, and that they talked about many things. He implies Mary sold him out in exchange for her own safety, but Bennett refuses to believe it, staying loyal to Mary, and demands his lawyer. Meanwhile, Mary is with her sister, who is convinced something is wrong. It's not normal for Mary to suddenly show up, wanting to learn how to shoot, with a cop tailing her. Mary finally opens up, confessing about her secret work. By day, she's an angel of mercy, but by night, she becomes an angel of death, ending the lives of patients who request assisted death. She admits it's illegal, which is why the police are watching her. After calming her sister, Mary goes to see Ben and asks him to take a walk with her. She tells him this house is where she grew up, that her mother died of cancer, and her father long before that. Ben asks how many people she's helped, but Mary pretends not to understand. He rephrases the question, asking how many people she and Bennett have put to death. She turns the question back on him, asking how many lives he's ended as a cop. He replies 2, one of them being his friend, who had been undercover and got too close to him, even becoming like family, before being exposed and arrested. That friend later killed himself in prison, and Ben has always blamed himself, counting it as one of the lives he ended. Then Ben asks her about Ethan Grant, the son of Judge Grant. He explains that Ethan left behind journals mentioning 2 people who would help him end his life and free him from his suffering, though he never named them. Judge Grant refuses to believe his son chose that path and is convinced someone killed him, which is why he ordered the investigation. The case was nearly dropped until the death of Troy, the soccer player, brought everything back. Ben is deliberately pressing Mary, trying to catch her off guard or make her slip up out of fear. She tells him she doesn't know anything about what he's saying and steps away so he can answer his ringing phone. His partner informs him the house belongs to a woman named Nicole, but the father's name on record is different from Mary's father's name, meaning either Nicole isn't Mary's sister or Mary changed her father's name for some reason. Ben tells the officer to dig deeper into Mary and call him if he finds anything. Back at the station, Bennett is still being questioned by Frank. Bennett says Frank must be thrilled he got another chance to drag him back into Mary's orbit after it was proven he operated on a patient while high, which cost him his medical license and pushed him into working with Mary. In the middle of their exchange, attorney Lisa walks in. Bennett had asked a friend to call the best lawyer in town, and unfortunately, that turned out to be Lisa. Since there's no evidence against Bennett, Lisa gets him out of the informal interrogation. If Frank tried to formalize it, he'd land himself in trouble. Frank responds with a cooperation deal. If Bennett agrees to set Mary up by wearing a wire to record an official confession that she performs assisted deaths, Bennett will get off and she'll go to prison. The offer stands only until midnight. They're allowed to leave the station. Over a meal together, Lisa tells Bennett he's accused of ending people's lives and, speaking hypothetically and off the record, asks if, assuming he really does it, is it driven by compassion? Bennett says yes, of course, to spare patients from suffering, but also mentions the $10,000 fee because otherwise those patients would face a long, painful end. Lisa says that line of thinking brings them back to Frank's offer. Would he hand over his colleague, whose name she prefers not to know, to the justice system in exchange for immunity? Before he answers, she urges him to think carefully because the same offer could be made to Mary. He must be sure she wouldn't accept it and send him to prison. He weighs her words, knowing his choice could mean delivering Mary or himself. Meanwhile, Mary is with Ben and Nicole, chatting about how she and Ben first met when Ben gets a call from his partner explaining the reason behind Mary's name change. Frank himself gets on the line to say that Mary changed her father's name after she turned 18, following her mother's death, and that Mary was investigated over that death because her mother didn't die of cancer or by taking her own life. They found her dumped in a lake, her hands tied behind her back. When they interrogated her, all she said was that she had tried to save her mother, and Ben is warned to be careful because Mary isn't who she seems. After he hangs up, he finds Mary standing behind him. She tells him she wants to be honest with him, but he immediately pulls out his phone to record her, no longer trusting her, and even calls her by her old name before she changed it. She tells him he doesn't know the truth of what really happened. Ben's tone becomes sharp and accusatory, so Mary decides to make him leave the house, refusing to discuss anything further. After he's gone, she listens to a message from Bennett and tries to call him, but he doesn't answer because he's sitting in front of Grady, asking to buy heroin despite having been clean. Grady is suspicious, but Bennett insists he needs the drugs because they're the only thing that make him feel at ease, the only escape from his sense of failure, and that he's cut ties with Mary, or she cut ties with him. After leaving Grady, distraught and broken, Bennett calls Lisa and tells her he's accepted Frank's deal. Meanwhile, Mary sits with Nicole, shaken by Ben's discovery of what happened to their mother. Nicole reassures her, reminding her that they ended their mother's life together, sparing her from unbearable pain. Just as Mary rescues patients now, they had rescued their own mother then. Nicole insists dumping her in the lake was the only way to free her from her depression and agony. At the hospital, chaos erupts after Sydney's disappearance. The police are there daily, investigating how he escaped custody and who helped him. Mary herself is questioned since she had arranged his transfer. She tells them Sydney requested the move because he thought he was being watched and feared whoever shot him would come finish the job. Keeping him in the ER would have made it easier for an attacker to reach him. The police also review street camera footage and spot a black car leaving the hospital, though the driver isn't visible. They run the plates to trace it. At the same time, Ben arrives at Bennett's place to wire him with the listening device that will capture Mary's confession. But it's clear Bennett is distracted, still under the influence of heroin. He loathes himself for what he's about to do, betray Mary, his colleague and partner. He tells Ben that Mary truly cares for him, that he's the first man she's been drawn to since divorcing her husband, and that what's about to happen will destroy her because both her lover and her closest friend will have betrayed her. At the same time, Bennett has the wire fitted and changes his clothes before going to meet Mary for their next case. She apologizes to him for how she had spoken before, but quickly notices he's high. It breaks her even more, realizing he went back to heroin because she had blamed him for everything that happened. She tells him it's her fault he relapsed, that he's the only one who's ever stood by her and supported her. Bennett can't respond, ashamed of himself and of what he's doing, recording every word she says with the intention of handing her over to the police to save himself. They arrive at their new patient's place, but Mary is surprised to find the man has invited his friends to be there as well. He explains they only came to check on him and would leave soon. Mary checks on the patient, who says he's tired and feels his time has finally come. She asks Bennett to get the paperwork, but his expression is uneasy, and his hands shake as he stares at her in tears. Then, in a moment of guilt, he lifts his shirt to show her the wire. Mary realizes instantly what's happening and is stunned that her colleague agreed to betray her like this. The patient notices the device as well, so Mary discreetly whispers to him to follow her lead. She advises him out loud to keep attending his therapy sessions, to spend more time with his friends, and writes him a note telling him to reject her and ask her to leave. He does exactly that, and Mary plays along, pretending the session is over, while chalking Bennett's behavior up to him being strung out and unfocused. She tells him to go home and think about what he's done, then walks out. Frank, watching from a distance, realizes what happened and that Bennett backed out of the deal. Furious, he lunges at Bennett, ready to beat him for ruining the operation. But Ben steps in to stop him. Ben tells him the operation was unofficial and without a warrant, so they couldn't arrest her anyway. He takes responsibility for the failure, admitting it's because he let himself fall for the suspect. Ben calls Judge Grant to explain the situation, saying he's withdrawing from the case and won't pursue it any further, then walks away. Mary returns to the hospital, trying to focus on her work, but clearly shaken and distracted. She mistakenly orders a nurse to give a patient 50 milligrams of morphine for relief. The nurse immediately objects, saying that dosage would put the patient in a coma. Mary quickly corrects herself, saying she meant 5 milligrams, not 50. The nurse gently tells her she looks exhausted and asks if something's wrong, then tries to lift her spirits with good news. One of Mary's patients has just come out of a coma, one they had expected would last much longer. She's shocked and goes to check on the patient, finding him awake and improving as if by a miracle, even though just a few days earlier she had been ready to take him off life support to spare him his suffering. The experience makes her question what she's been doing. Then she gets a call from her daughter's school. Jess and Naomi got into a fight, and hit each other. Mary rushes over, but both girls refuse to explain what caused it. The principal suspends them for 2 weeks, which angers Lisa, but leaves her no choice but to accept. Mary tries to talk to Jess, but her daughter rejects her, saying she doesn't love her because she always lies, is barely around, and when she is, she only brings more problems. Jess insists she doesn't want anything tying her to Mary and walks away. Kevin, Mary's ex-husband, tries to comfort her, telling her he sold his house for a good price, won't ask her for money for the girls anymore, and will pay back everything he owes her. He urges her to focus on her daughters, while he moves in with Louise, whom he truly loves and who loves him back. Later, Mary arranges to meet a patient in a hotel to end his life. He's visibly weak and ill, but happy to finally choose his own ending instead of continued suffering. He thanks her, saying she's kind for carrying out his decision, while the real villains are the government, forcing people to remain hooked up to machines and medications that don't heal them, only prolonging their agony. Mary gives him the champagne laced with sedatives, and his life ends peacefully. Right after, her phone rings. It's Bennett. When she answers, he can barely speak, gasping for her help after overdosing on heroin and appearing close to death. Mary rushes to him, administers an injection to revive him, then pounds on him in anger, telling him he has no right to call her after what he did, that she'll never trust him again. She leaves him behind. Meanwhile, the police track down the black car that transported Sydney from the hospital. They find it dumped at a junkyard, Sydney's body inside. During their search, they also discover Mary's phone left in the vehicle. At the same time, Mary goes to Grady, asking him to become her new partner. The police finally secure a search warrant for the house of Troy, the soccer player whose life ended at the very beginning. They force their way in, despite his widow's protests, and comb through his room, convinced something suspicious happened, especially after discovering he withdrew $10,000 just 3 days before his death. They find a note with a phone number on it and confront his wife for hiding it. She admits Troy had asked her for help in ending his life, but they argued. She called him selfish, and she assumed he carried it out on his own. This gives them a fresh lead that may also tie into Sydney's case. Ben then receives a call from the station. Sydney's body has been found, and beside him was a phone showing a call from someone Ben recognizes, the very same man Mary most recently assisted at the hotel. They rush to that man's home, but find it empty, only a receipt for a hotel room reservation. They head straight to the hotel and discover the patient dead inside the room. This time, they're certain Mary was involved, and now they finally have the chance to run toxicology on a victim of hers, proving he died from the sedative and not of natural causes. Meanwhile, Frank gets a call from Bennett saying he wants to confess something. Excited at the breakthrough, Frank leaves Ben and hurries back to the station. At the same time, Mary is with Grady, walking him through her process, sharing every detail of how she carries out her procedures. She tells him that with every patient's file, there's also a recorded video of the victim giving consent, explaining it's their choice. She even offers to teach him how to administer injections so he can assist her in the future. But Grady, more cunning than she expected, says he'll only learn if she demonstrates on herself. He doesn't trust the substance enough otherwise. Mary reluctantly agrees, injects herself, and soon feels dizzy. She stumbles toward the bathroom, collapses, and manages to call Ben. Barely conscious, she tells him about a man named Grady, a drug dealer. She claims she only went to ask him to stop supplying Bennett, but instead, he drugged her and plans to kill her. She pleads with Ben to come help immediately. At the same time, Bennett is at the station with Frank, telling him that his dealer, Grady, has been forcing him to hand over names of people to target, demanding money in return, and threatening to kill him if he didn't comply. Bennett explains he came to confess because he had only 2 options: admit he was an addict manipulated by his dealer into giving patient names, or wear a wire to prove to the police that he and Mary were just doctors providing emotional support, not killing anyone. Meanwhile, Mary, barely able to control her body, stumbles back to Grady. He realizes something is wrong. The solution she injected wasn't saline as she claimed, but the same sedative used to end lives. She admits it, but tells him it was diluted with water. She taunts him, saying he's not as clever as he thinks. He's just a drug dealer, a criminal, who even tried to hurt her daughter, and she won't forgive that. Furious, Grady pulls a gun and aims it at her. At that moment, Ben bursts into the house and sees the gun pointed at Mary. He fires, killing Grady, but is hit himself in the exchange. Bleeding, he begs Mary to save him, but she tells him there's nothing she can do. Ben immediately calls the police, requesting an ambulance. Mary recounts everything to him, explaining how Grady tried to kill her because she wanted to protect Bennett. Ben believes her and sends her home to rest. He thinks he's finally closed the case. After all, his mission had been to bring down whoever was responsible for Judge Grant's son's death, and with the files found at Grady's place, the charges could all be pinned on him. But as he prepares to leave, Ben notices a book on the table. Opening it, he finds a photo of Mary inside Grady's house, holding the sedative. Doubt creeps back in. They hand Judge Grant the recording left by Ethan, proving that his son had chosen to end his life himself, and not by anyone else's hand. Frank is satisfied that the assisted death cases they had been chasing are now officially closed. Bennett, however, serves a short prison sentence for drug use. When Ben finishes his work at the station, he goes to see Mary and gives her the incriminating photo. She explains that Grady forced her to pose with the sedative as blackmail when she confronted him earlier to stop him from supplying Bennett. Ben tells her she doesn't need to justify herself anymore. The case is closed. Mary resumes her life, working again with Bennett once he's recovered from addiction and released from prison. By day, she remains an angel of mercy, but by night, she continues as the angel of death.